All right, it is time to talk about the series that I plan to maybe potentially start in the upcoming year. I do this video every American Thanksgiving week. I love doing it. It's one of my favorite end of the year things to do because I love planning. I love ambitious plans. I love the potential of new favorites on the horizon. So I've been doing this ever since I've had a channel. And so we're going to go through briefly what I put on my list last year, and then talk about carryovers and what I want to get to this year. It is always overly ambitious. I put 10 things on these lists, and the idea of starting 10 series when I am a series finisher, like I always have my series check-in videos, so like, if I like a series, I'm probably going to finish it, which means I'm not starting a bunch of other series. Like, I do always have a bunch of series on the go, but the idea of continuing what I have, starting these, organically just picking things up, because these tend to be series that are like already finished versus I like reading new releases, and new releases are always like, oh, here's the first or second book in a series and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to talk about, and first going through what I had on my list from last year. So the wins from last year. I read Rainwild Chronicle. I'm actually in the middle of the Fitz and the Fool trilogy. Realm of the Elderlings, it's going to be finished this year, which is very awesome and cool. A success, but also a miss, is I did read Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri, who I love. I love The Jasmine Throne. I love The Only Under Sword. I did not love The Empire of Sand, and I will not be continuing with that duology, probably. Like, I just can think of so many other books in that type of space that I would pick up before I picked up the second book or companion novel in that series. I also did get 100 pages into Empire of Silence, the first book in Sun Years, and DNF'd it, so I will not be continuing with that series, but I mean, technically did attempt it on this list. And then my reread, because I sometimes put like rereads on this as like to remind myself, you're going to start that series next year. I had Red Rising, which I'm all up to date on, so 'twas a success. And now we'll get into the, I think this counts. I think it counts in the spirit of what I put on the list. So, Theft of Swords. I have started. I have not finished, but I've started it and read enough of it to know that I want to continue. So at least in my head, I at least tried it out, and I'm hoping by the end of this year to have finished the first book. It's just that, like, it keeps getting put on the back burner because I keep having other reading projects, and I feel bad for the book. It's not the book's fault. It's just not happening at the moment, but I'm excited to actually sink into it eventually. Louise Erdrich. I put the Love Medicine series, which is kind of like most, if not all of her books are in this interconnected world. But I have at least read a Louise Erdrich this year, and I rewatched the video, and the whole intention was like, I own a bunch. And did I read any of the ones I owned? No. But I did read one this year, which is something I really wanted to do, because when I did the video last year, it had been over a year since I'd picked up a Louise Erdrich, and she's one of my favorite authors. So I think spirit of the rule worked out. Did I read Love Medicine? No. Similarly, T. Kingfisher. I put Clockwork Boys on the list, and I've read a bunch of T. Kingfisher this year, so I feel like in terms of read an author you know you love, I succeeded, because I've read at least 3 or 4 T. Kingfisher this year, just none of them were in that series. So, like I said, the spirit of it. And then the last one is Seal Polk, which I just wanted to read something by this author, and I didn't end up reading the Witch series. I can't read Witch Cycle, Witch Mark, can't remember. I vaguely know blue cover, maybe a bicycle on the front of it, but I did read their novella, even though I knew the end, and I really did like the novella. It hasn't turned me off from trying any of their works, but it also didn't propel me into those novels. And so now we'll get into, well, no, we'll talk about one failure that isn't going to carry over, then we'll talk about some carryovers and the new stuff. So I did not get to Kushiel's Dart. This does not mean I will never get to Kushiel's Dart, but I really want my big, chunky reads next year to be Malazan focused, because I've truly basically taken over a year and a half off from Malazan, and I love that series, and I don't know what I'm doing. So I don't need another thick book series, even if it reads easy. So that might be more of a 2025 in the future project. These books don't, self-combust. So Kushiel's Dart did not happen this year, and I don't think it's going to happen next year. But it's not like I'm never going to touch it again. Another book that has been on these lists for so long, and truly, I don't know what to do. I think I need to buy myself a copy, because I think if I just keep waiting for myself to just take it out from the library and read it, it's not going to happen. But this is War Child by Karen Lowacki, and I have read more Karen Lowacki. I've read probably almost all of the short stories that are out by this author, and I always really like them. So why haven't I read this book? It's even in second person. And I've been wanting more sci-fi in my life, and this is a sci-fi trilogy. So it is on the list, and goodness, I really hope this time next year I am not being like, and I didn't get to War Child again. Because that just, it makes me feel like a bit of a failure. I'm just like, really? Do you actually want to read this book, Angela? Not sure. And then the other carryover is I do want to get to Clockwork Boys. I want to get into that series, and then the following duology, I don't know, there's like some amount of books that are in this one world by T. Kingfisher, starting with the Clockwork Boys. And I think they are like T. Kingfisher's version of fantasy romance. So I would like to read those, start with Clockwork Boys. So with those carryovers out of the way, let's get to the other 8 that I have on this list, starting with one that I've been wanting to try. I'm nervous about it because I don't always align with the tastes of the readers who love this book, but this is The Wolf. Leanna at Leanna's Library loves this book, loves the whole trilogy. The 3rd book, I think, came out late last year, and she had read it like 2 or 3 times already. I don't know. I know it's going to be a little bit more culture-focused, but I've been really vibing with that lately in my fantasy space. So I don't know a lot of the premise of it. I also know Jessie really likes it, Jessie May. And so maybe between the fact that both of them like it, I might have a good chance, because there are things I like that both of them like, but it's very rare that I feel like they both like something a lot like that. So we'll see. But every time I see it at the bookstore, I want to buy it. It just feels like a really meaty fantasy series that I can just sink my teeth into. I really want to give it a shot. So that's why that's on this list. I wanted to have a self-pub series. Now what's tricky about this, and feel free to give me recommendations in the comments down below, or if you know a blogger or a YouTuber that they have a video that answers this question for me, but I put a fantasy self-published series on this list. It was harder for me to find a completed sci-fi self-published fantasy, and I think that's because the fantasy awards are a little bit more well-known than the sci-fi awards. Regardless, I wanted it to be complete because there's an endless supply of first book and series, but I wanted to have a complete series to try out. And this is Threadlight, I think is the series name, with The Voice of War being the first book. I think this is by Jack Argyle, Bookborn's husband, and I am curious about it. I've been kind of itching for this magic system focused sort of world. I'm sure it's not just focused on the magic system, but when people talk about it, they really like talking about the magic system. I was like, yeah, I would like a really fun magic system. I would like to enjoy that. I think it's going to hit a lot of fun, cathartic, storytelling beats. I want to give it a shot. I know Michael Knipp enjoyed it, and Michael Knipp and I have had overlap in tastes. I want to try and read more self-published books. I'm not very good at that. I'm very good at figuring out my tastes and what I want in traditional published space. Still working on it in self-published, so this is my attempt at, setting the intention here as a series. Another series I want to try is a backlist, so this is Martha Wells. I feel like I've only read Murderbot by Martha Wells. I have not read Witch King. I have not read The City of Bones. But this is The Cloud Roads, and this is, I think, one of her older fantasy that's supposed to be really cool. Bethany at Beautifully Bookish Bethany really liked this, and I've been recommended it many times, so I want to give it a shot. This next one, I'm going to call it a duology. It might be more of a companion novel situation, but the first book is Sorcerer of the Wild Deeps, and these, I believe, are slightly longer than novellas, but not quite full-length novel-length books, the 200-page-ish area. And these have been on my radar for years. I think Thistle and Verse first put the second book on my radar, and I feel like I've known other people who've read the first book since then. I don't have a good sense of the premise of it, but I like the covers. People I trust their opinions of have read it and enjoyed it. And so I want to, give it my own chance. It's kind of one of those under the radar, hidden gem, hopefully, sort of picks for this list. And then I have 2 more sci-fi things because I feel like this year I have been reading a bunch of fantasy. A lot of it's not really hitting for me, but I've been reading plenty of it. And I haven't been reading as much science fiction, and a lot of my fun has been in science fiction, so maybe try and prioritize it. I feel like it's just so much easier to prioritize fantasy series than science fiction series. So I have a classic, and then one that I feel like the fan base loves, and it's kind of one of those complicated science fictions that I really want. So the classic, the first book actually came out my birth year, and that is the Mars trilogy. I read nothing by this author. And actually, even before BookTube, I had this book on one of my TBR lists. That's before I knew they were called TBRs, but I had it on my Goodreads to read shelf, and I kept looking at it, but I kept feeling like maybe it would be a little too dry for me. But I actually have found that I like that more deductive or, I don't know, culture-focused sort of thing in sci-fi. I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but like when I read Symbiosis last year, I really liked kind of how we were a step back. And I like that in Asimov's Foundation. Like sometimes I'm really in the mood for that. And this is, I think, about setting up a colony on Mars or something like that. So I don't know how character focused it is. I know this author is really well, like, prolific in the science fiction space, and I've read nothing. So I feel like this is as good a place to start as any. And so I'm putting it on the list. It's probably the least likely to happen of all these things unless I feel really compelled or pushed, but I was just thinking about some backlist science fiction that I haven't picked up that is kind of in this vein of hard sci-fi that I haven't read in a while, and this is the one that had me most interested, just especially because they're still writing today, and a lot of people that I do now follow on BookTube, like Rachel at Kalanadi, tend to like this author, and I'm like, well, we have other overlap. Maybe I should try this author out. And then this one is Terra Ignota, that series. It starts with this book. I think it's a quartet. It's finished. I remember first really hearing about it when I was going into the Hugos, and a bunch of people being like, oh, I love this series. So what I might end up doing with this is seeing if there's enough interest to have it be like a read-along for my Patreon, because a lot of us tend to kind of like sci-fi, so we'll see if that even gets traction. I haven't put it up for a vote. I haven't told anyone. This is probably the first time people are seeing that thought, but regardless, I would like it to be some sort of buddy read situation because I think it is one of those science fictions where you're trying to keep track of a bunch of stuff. I don't even really know what it's about. It's in the far future. Humans are doing a thing. I think we're in a golden age, which is always key for, sure, it's a golden age, but for who? Like, classic science fiction. I don't even know if that's the case. Maybe it is a utopia. No idea. But whenever I've mentioned other science fiction things that I've liked, because they're convoluted and involved, this is always brought up. And so I think it needs to come off my bucket list and onto an actual list of potential. And the last two I'll bring up are rereads, just because I am going to be restarting these series and it's happening. One of them is for sure happening. The other one I want to happen. And this, again, the other one might be a Patreon thing or maybe it'll be a public thing. I haven't committed yet because I'm still like thinking about what next year is going to look like for many reasons. But the one I know for sure that I'm rereading are the Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson. The 5th book, the final part of this Stormlight arc, comes out next year, hypothetically. So, yeah, that's the thing. Those books are big. So, I'm sure it'll take me most of next year. And I remember the last time I reread them, I feel like I didn't give myself enough breathing room between each book because they're just long. Like objectively, they just take a while. So I want to make sure I'm not just overdoing it, taking it at my own pace. It'll be my second time reading Rhythm of War, which was very fun, my first read. And then the other one, and this is the one where I don't know where the buddy read's happening, but it's going to happen. And this is Machineries of Empire by Yoon Ha Lee. I miss this series, and I know it's a win for me, and I want to share it with more people. And yeah, this is happening. I'm very excited. Like I said, I don't know how it's going to happen. If you're interested, let me know down below. And if you're, already follow me so that you'll know where and when it's going to be happening. But I have a should you read for this series. I have a world building video for this series. I love it. It's involved. It throws you right in the deep end. It's got funny, like, larger than life characters. It's a really fascinating conversation on this type of empire and rebellion and the winners and losers in that scenario. It's really good. And I hope we get more works in that world one day because there's still so many questions. It's just great. This was entirely inspired by the fact that Bethany had just read these recently, and I'm like, I miss that world so much. So yeah, hopefully more wins than losses on this list. What series do you think you're going to be starting next year? Do you do stuff like this? Is this too much planning for your reading? And if you just want to leave an emoji to let me know you're here, leave a spaceship emoji because I think there's a good amount of sci-fi on here. And otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.